All right, y'all. I got some major breaking news. Of course, we didn't do a video last night. I was going to, but I decided not to. So, yeah, we're doing it tonight. It's now 12:06 a.m. Of course, this is after Sunday Night Football has long concluded. But yeah, we wanted to wait on this because we thought we were getting some breaking news today, and we ended up doing so. But this is our typical recap. What happened this week, and we're not going through all the games as usual. We're going for just major big ones, just three of the games, and we'll talk about the others later on. I guess somewhat during the week or throughout the week. But man, what a huge weekend with a lot of games going on in the ACC and complete chaos. We'll touch on that. Georgia survives, Miami stunned, which is a part of the ACC chaos, and then Texas survives. How about that? But the first thing we need to get to is the big breaking news, which is not surprising, but is what it is. Hugh Freeze has been fired from Auburn. This was coming. I told you guys that there was going to be some sort of regime change happening at Auburn. Basically, since the Missouri and Georgia game, I think it was pretty clear what was going to happen based on historical evidence and just how the team was going. It was no surprise after last night. The final score of the Kentucky Auburn game, 10-3, and combined 13 points. Anyone who bet the under on the over/under from FanDuel or whatever won a whole lot of big money from that. But hey, look, kudos to Kentucky. They showed up defensively. They played pretty well against a pretty just piss poor Auburn offense. Let's just not bury the lead here. That's what it is, and they did a very fantastic job of defending that. And their defense played pretty well. Offense for Kentucky, whatever. But the major story here is for Auburn. Of course, the coaching changes now happened. The offense under Hugh Freeze. Every single season he's been at Auburn. Every single year he has been there. It's been bad. And I mentioned this on Twitter yesterday, or on X, Twitter, on Saturday, kind of yesterday, but whatever. I mentioned this on Saturday that you can't really tell a difference between the Hugh Freeze era and the Brian Harsin era. There is no difference at all. I mean, if you look at both of those, if you just look at them on paper and you didn't know who was who, you would still think that Brian Harsin was still the coach here. And like you would believe yourself. If you knew that Brian Harsin was the coach at some point, and you looked in the future at what Auburn would do in the next from like 2021 all the way to 2026, you would have convinced yourself that Brian Harsin was still the coach at Auburn. But he's not. He's not there anymore. It's Hugh Freeze, and that's what's demoralizing about all of this is that you were sold that Hugh Freeze was this, offensive savant. He was going to change Auburn football. He was, going to usher in this new offensive system. It wasn't going to be like Gus Malzahn. It was going to be totally different, more consistent, more just a better offensive output. You're going to get also better recruiting, which you didn't end up getting, which is the difference between, if you're going to look at any major difference between Hugh Freeze and Brian Harsin, of course, the big difference is the recruiting, which you have seen. But unfortunately, this isn't good enough. It just wasn't good enough on the offensive side of the football. He made terrible decisions at quarterback in the portal. You had Payne Thorne, Jackson Arnold, Ashton Daniels. Those are, let's just not bury the lead. They're crappy quarterbacks. And I feel like every single team you face, not named a FCS or a G5 for the most part, looks at your quarterback room or your talent there and goes, man, we don't really fear that. We don't really fear your quarterback. We fear the receivers. We fear the running backs. We fear everything else. We don't necessarily fear that. And that didn't work. You can also argue that the offensive line this year just wasn't good enough. It was being billed as the best Auburn offensive line in 10 years plus. Okay, wake me up when October ends or whatever. That was dreadful. Now, in terms of candidates here, going forward, of course, obviously, look, we knew Hugh Freeze was going to be gone. That was something we even talked about back during the summer and spring. So no surprise here. But the candidates where the surprise and the confusion begins to come in. So for the longest time, me and others thought that this search, whenever it was going to start, was going to end. It was going to begin and end with John Summerall at Tulane. Of course, Summerall coached at Troy. He's coaching the SEC for a while. He's from the state of Alabama. His wife is an Auburn alum. I think he said even privately this was his sort of dream job if it ever came open. So it made sense that John Summerall would be the perfect fit here for Auburn. Well, it turns out, according to people like P. Nakos and Bruce Feldman, who I trust in the industry in terms of coaching searches and hot boards, they're all reporting the same thing, that not only is John Sermo up there, but guess who else is up there? Jimbo Fisher. And I have no joy in saying that. Jimbo Fisher is up for the Auburn head coaching job. Now, if you don't believe me, if you don't know your history on Jimbo Fisher, he did coach Auburn for a while. He was the offensive coordinator there for a little bit. I think he's even mentioned himself that he's always wanted this job. He didn't get it back a number of years ago, but whatever. He has ties to Auburn, is all I'm going to say. And it's interesting. I listened to Josh Pate's show earlier, and he sort of made the sort of the argument that would be made by someone who would be advocating for Jimbo Fisher, and that if you're a booster and whatnot, and your thinking is, well, we know John Sternwell is out there, we know he's a good coach, but why don't we do it our way? Why don't we go our direction? And look, it didn't work the last time, but trust us, it'll happen again. Well, that's the worry with Auburn. I agree with Josh Pate. It worries me that the Auburn boosters and this, the Auburn ego and the sort of the hawkishness of the program in general, it leads me to believe, and it doesn't make me feel good saying this, that it just makes me worried that they're going to do and make the same mistakes over and over again, and it's going to happen again. That they're going to make some dopey hire, whether it's a Jimbo Fisher or whomever, and it's so idiotic, because the coach that you should be going after is right there, and John Sternwell, he's right there. He's literally begging for you to hire him. Again, his wife is Auburn alumni. He has ties to the state of Alabama. He's wanted this job. It's his dream job, and you're considering Jimbo Fisher? Really? I said this on Twitter earlier. If you were to do that, any program, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's like Virginia Tech or Penn State or whatever, Auburn, that would be the stupidest and most idiotic thing ever. Do you not realize, if you're an Auburn booster and you're listening to this, which I know for sure you are, sarcasm, do you realize how much of a mess Florida State was and Texas A&M was after Jimbo left and when he was there, especially in his final years at Florida State and his full time at Texas A&M? Do you realize that? I do. I know a lot of folks from what I've listened to who covered the Florida State team back in the day who have talked about it. Bud Elliott on Cover 3 and Nolecast has talked about it, how much of a mess Texas A&M was under Jimbo Fisher, and even Florida State, especially because Bud's connected there with Florida State and whatnot. He's alumni. He knows that, and he's reported on it. And it sickens me that folks do not understand that, how terrible it was and how dysfunctional that program was, not to mention his offense is, just ugh. And it just embarrasses me. And look, I'm from the state of Alabama. I understand the whole Auburn dynamic, the fan base and, the whole Auburn-Bama rivalry. I understand that there's a lot of passion, and the fans are very, how should I put this? I know that I've put it in different ways before. They're very prideful. And hiring Jimbo Fisher, I will guarantee you, it would be, at least in my opinion, the equivalent of Tennessee trying to hire Greg Schiano. It would be the exact same thing. I think you would get a total protest, a total movement against that. That would be unacceptable. I think the Auburn fan base, look, they're in the SEC. They know what Jimbo Fisher did at Texas A&M. They know how it ended in Tallahassee. Don't be lying to yourself. You know what happened. But then again, according to Josh Pate, these boosters are this maverick personality, and they want to hijack the coaching search like they've done before, and we're going to do it our way, and then we're finally going to get it right. And it just no. Do not hire Jimbo Fisher. No. We move on. I guess we get to some of the games here. Georgia survived Florida here in Jacksonville, no less. For recording this high atop Jacksonville, Florida, at the insane hour of 12:15 in the morning. Good game to watch. Very entertaining game. And like I said before, after the Ole Miss game, I'll say it here, Kirby Smart has a way to sort of will his teams to win, or at least to winning games. I was trying to say there, unless it's Kellen DeBoer or Nick Saban at Alabama. They can do that. Kirby Smart and company can do that. They did it last year at times, besides the Bama game. They've done it this year, besides the Bama game. And again, that's more of an indictment on the whole Georgia-Bama problem. But outside of that, the teams they face, no problem, no sweat. Tennessee game, no sweat. Ole Miss game, no sweat. Florida game, no sweat. Yeah, you feel threatened. in all those games you won, except for the Bama game you lost. But you didn't feel you didn't feel panicked. You didn't feel any urgency. You just felt calm, collective. Like it almost felt like to me like Kirby Smart. If I was in like the locker room, whatnot, I guarantee you he was telling his players, "Guys, we got this. It's okay. Let's relax a little bit, have fun. You know, chill. We got this. It's okay." And I think he does a good job of doing that, from what I can tell, based on how they have done. Again, except for the Bama thing, which is a totally different situation, but impressive to see Kirby and that staff there, given what they have and the limitations they have. They still can't run the football consistently. Yes, they have to rely on other things on their offense. Yes, their defense isn't. I don't think anyone fears that necessarily. Obviously, Billy Gonzalez and Florida did not, but Kirby Smart in Georgia, they had this will factor to will themselves to wins, not named Bama. And I think this is example 33 of that, of the other 32 results of Georgia winning big games, not named against Alabama. So kudos to them. For Florida, I mean, that sucks. You had your chances. You had opportunities to get a statement win in an otherwise disastrous year for your program, but it is what it is. Of course, we'll move on, and we'll see what the coaching carousel looks for you guys, but that happened yesterday. Miami, stunned by SMU. Listen, man, it was not a good day for the ACC yesterday. Not a good day, and it wasn't even Miami. So they lost to SMU. Again, entertaining game, fun game, went to overtime. Got to give credit to SMU and their program, man. I mean, Red Lashley, I remember watching him when he was at Auburn with Malzahn in 2013, and he was with him at Arkansas State before that. Just watching him sort of grow up, at Auburn, moving on to other ventures, and just to see him having success, man, and him sort of shepherding them from the American to the ACC, where I thought they were going to struggle last year. I totally thought they were going to. They proved me wrong, and they're proving me wrong again a little bit this year. They're bowl eligible. I believe they are bowl eligible now. I believe that's 6 wins now. I think. If I recall correctly, I mean they just an all-out effort for them, just all-out effort. It was a Super Bowl. It was our big major opportunity. It was, of course, Miami's first major trip on the road outside of the state of Florida. So you had to think that this was going to be a major, a Super Bowl moment for SMU, and they took advantage of it and they got the win. For Miami, it was a typical Mario Cristobal game. Turnovers, penalties, just the overall procedural stuff, bad. And no, I'm not saying he's getting fired. No. But it does lead you to wonder with Mario Cristobal and them, much like last year, are they wasting something? Because it feels like to me they are wasting a very good offensive line and a very good defensive line. Their secondary, questionable. And look, we kind of knew going into it this season that it was a matter of a few questions about, could Corey Heatherman, the new defensive coordinator there, could he give himself enough time to sort of overhaul this Miami defense that was so bad last year under Lance Guidry? It turns out that they're halfway there, sort of like with Blake Baker at LSU, where there's parts of the defense that are improving, but there's still parts of it that are kind of dreadful. You saw that yesterday to a certain extent. Turnovers from the quarterback of Carson Beck. And that's kind of like how it's been so far at times this year. It just kind of is what it is. Nothing else to say. It just kind of is what it is. So hats off to SMU, and of course Lashley getting that huge contract. I don't think he's leaving SMU. I think he's happy there. I think he's very much so content and what they're building over there in Dallas. Very happy to see SMU just back in general, man. Like it's been. Imagine yourself telling yourself that 15 years ago that SMU, even with the cloud, if you will, the shadow of the 1980s death penalty, that they would one day, let alone be in the ACC of all conferences, but be competing for several things, a national championship now, the expanded playoff, and the conference championships, and being ranked and having multiple 10 and 11 win seasons. Like, imagine telling yourself that 15 and 20 years ago with the notion of the backdrop of the scandal back in the 80s and with the recruiting stuff. And it just amazes me that they're back at that level now. So hats off to them. And I guess to add on to the ACC stuff, a horrible weekend for them for the most part. A bit of they're not a total trash, situation for them, but more or less a sweet and sour situation. I mean, you had Louisville come back and win. You had Virginia come back and win on the road at Cal. I thought they were going to lose that game, Cal was going to win that game. I was wrong, but I was right about one of them. Georgia Tech losing to NC State. No shocker there. Again, I feel like to me this was the NC State Georgia Tech game. Excuse me. I felt like that Georgia Tech, not Georgia Tech, Clemson NC State game in 2011 when Clemson was a top 10 team and they lost. Felt the same way about it. That's what we got yesterday. I'm not surprised there. Huge win for the whole staff there, and just incredible that Carter Finley Stadium continues to be just continues to victimize these ACC teams that come in there and they're nationally ranked. Always amazes me. And a lot of folks tell you, whether it's the Clemson fans, your Florida State fans, or even Miami fans, will tell you Carter Finley Stadium is a tough place to play at. It's underrated. It's sort of like the ACC version of like Mississippi State, where you don't fear it necessarily on paper, but when you watch either previous games or you actually go there and you go, oh, this is actually a kind of a low-key hostile environment. Like, it's pretty good. So hats off to them, that whole staff there, up there with NC State. Then finally here, we'll sort of end with this. Texas surviving Vanderbilt. A fun game towards the end. Sort of an example of train derailment theory, which I've explained before. I'll kind of explain it here, where in train derailment theory, it's sort of like in the real life with a train derailing, right? It's different than a crash. Because train crash is when you have like a train, like a freight train, for example, crashes into another freight train, or God forbid, another vehicle or automobile. So that's a crash. But a derailment is just, maybe like a piece of track is loose. Maybe there's some like internal issues with the engine, or mechanical issues with the track, or things like that. Just the little small things that can sort of build up over time that cause the train to derail. That to me was Vanderbilt yesterday. Just the little things that added up yesterday derailed them a little bit. And unfortunately, by the time they got themselves back on track, metaphorically, they were out of time. They ran out of time, and they made the game close. I'll give them credit for that, but they ran out of time. And for Texas, man, this was a sort of an attitude game for them. An attitude game in terms of sort of with Texas, it was kind of them flexing their muscles a little bit, showing you that, look, the potential we have had this year especially on the defensive side of the football, and even especially the offensive side of the football too, it's always been there. They just haven't shown it yet. And fortunately for Texas, they showed it this week with Arch Manning, who was healthy and was able to play somehow, some way. It's modern medicine, man, miracles. But they showed up through the majority of the game. And look, I don't blame them for the fourth quarter sort of mini collapse there, or pseudo collapse. I mean, look, Vanderbilt and Pavia, they're always going to fight. Yes, there's their limitations there. Yes, there's part of it, the scaling thing, where they're playing tougher competition now, especially more complete teams, like not named LSU or not named Missouri. Yeah, that's a part of it, but they're still a good team. I think they'll still enter that Tennessee game with 2 losses probably. So, and speaking of Tennessee, we'll wrap up with this. Oklahoma going on the road to Knoxville, beating Tennessee. I was wrong on this. I thought Tennessee was going to win, but they're going to cover. It looked like that was going to be the case. Aguilar was playing pretty well, but let me tell you this, man. When he's under pressure, Aguilar, and I think Brent Venables and them, the whole staff there in Norman, they figured this out. That when he's under pressure, Joey Aguilar, he crumbles. He goes out like a dying star. Like, it's almost kind of sad. Because I think they do some good stuff there with Tennessee and their offense this year. And I think, believe it or not, what Tennessee has done, given what people thought the season was going to be, right? Because all folks, including me, were thinking, okay, this is going to be a sort of a transitional situation, sort of a liminal year. People thought that was what was going to be. They didn't think that like Tennessee was going to be nationally ranked by after Halloween or the week of Halloween, and here we are. So I give Tennessee credit for what they have done, given the circumstances at hand. With all the turmoil back in the spring, with Nico leaving, and all of the changes they've had to make. Look, I give them some credit here for getting them to where they are right now. But the offense was dreadful. Again, Joey Aguilar under pressure is not good enough. The fumble return for a touchdown with our Mason Thomas, and they got hurt on the play. I'm not sure if he's going to be back next week or not. But Brent Venables, man, he is I know a lot of folks hate him. A lot of folks think he's a jerk and whatnot. And look, he can think that way, but you got to give him some credit here. He's a damn good defensive coach, really good defensive coach, and it proved again last night how valuable he is to that team defensively. Now, offensively, there's a lot of things you can talk about with Oklahoma. John Mateer. I mean, look, you can talk about hand injury stuff. Sure. I just wonder if the things that John Mateer was getting away with at the beginning of the year before the whole hand thing, it sort of seems like to me, even with games where they win, you're sort of seeing what the limitations are and why he is not going to the NFL draft after this year. The reason why he's probably going to stay another year in college. It's not a bad thing. Look, hey, I'm all for having talented players come back when they have to, but in terms of his own personal ambitions, he's not going to the NFL. There's certain things about him where doesn't scream him going pro and something football related at the moment. So look, kudos to them. I think defensively for Oklahoma, that was a spirited performance in a very hostile environment. I mean, Tennessee had the blackout uniforms, which I think those are the best uniforms in the country anywhere. The blackout uniforms, all black and orange, those are beautiful uniforms, just beautiful. And look, Oregon has some really good uniforms too. But Tennessee's blackouts are. I've always liked those and the smoky gray uniforms, with the grayish ones they wear. I've always liked both those two uniforms for Tennessee. I've always liked those. Those are very good. At least the black ones too are new, or at least newer, if you will, at least a new version of it. So I think that's all I have to cover here. I mean, we'll go over, of course, that's my computer here, the fan kick in, but of course we'll do our predictions and stuff on Tuesday. We'll go over more of the Auburn coaching search. Hopefully we'll have more information by then. But yeah, like I said, I agree with Josh Pittman. I am getting concerned about this Auburn search. Look, we've talked about before, with Auburn and how their program is run, and we've seen this movie before, right? 2020 with boosters and stuff, and just the way that certain folks want to hijack the coaching search there and not let certain folks who should be making the hire do the hire. I mean, that's Auburn, complete chaos. I would imagine this will not be a very clean coaching search, and I do not suspect that, unfortunately, contrary to how I feel and others, that John Summerall, who I believe should be in line to get this job, who I believe should be the candidate that this search should end with and start with, is not going to get this job. Because again, other folks are willing to hijack the coaching search because of their own personal ambitions and themselves claiming that they love Auburn. Well, as Josh Pate says, you can love something to death. And these Auburn folks, boosters, influencers, whoever, they can say they love Auburn, but you can love something to death. You can love something, but you can love it sort of in a very compulsive way, and you get in the way of it. That's my fear for Auburn, and that's my fear for this coaching search. And again, trust me, go look at 2020's coaching search, and go look at 2022's coaching search. That got you for a reason. There's a lot of twists and turns there, and there's a lot of twists and turns after you guys fire Malzahn. So if you're John Cohen, better put your foot down and actually make a hire that you actually make instead of letting other folks' personal agendas and personal brands get in the way. I'm telling you, that's what's going to happen, and that's why you're hearing names like Jimbo Fisher and I don't know, man. I just I really hope that's not the case there, but unfortunately, it probably is because it's Jabba, just Auburn being Auburn. So we'll be back on Tuesday if the Tuesday poll normal time. Whatnot, we'll get this out onto the YouTubes tomorrow morning. So until then, we'll enjoy your Monday. We'll see you guys on Tuesday, and hopefully we'll have more clarity on a lot more of the Auburn coaching search, and of course we'll go over the games for this upcoming week.